Hello again, everyone. Once again, we meet today to talk about ushering in a new reality on Thursday, June 5th, 2014. And of course, the phone rings. Um, Anyways, I am Rob Ryder. My email address is courtofrecord@aol.com. And please, if you can, if you would, if you find this useful, interesting, informative, could you please donate? By PayPal, it's my daughter's email address is the PayPal account name. That's Ashley Rytlewski@gmail.com. AShleyRytlewski@gmail.com. Or you could use the snail mail and send it to Robert Rytlewski. That's who I am at times. 10955 14 Mile Road, Rockford, Michigan 49341. And so why don't you stop right now, hit the pause, write this down, decide if you want to do it after you've watched the video, ponder it a bit, but at least you have the information. Really appreciate it. So what's going on? Where are we today? Well, I think that everybody realizes that we are under the laws of England. Fuck. Sorry about that. And as long as they didn't, they put some wording in, right? Blah 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 blah. Okay, so what does it mean to be on the laws of England? Well, until the time of the Norman invasion, that law before that, Anglo-Saxon time, would be called the custom of the realm, customary law, right? Law that goes back into forever. And then after the Norman invasion, then it would have been by statute, right? So you got the customary law that was already there. It's been there. We're going to use it. It's not going away. We're just not going to codify it. We're going to call that the customary law. Something along those lines. But one of the very first things that happened when William the First showed up is he passed an ordinance. And it was the ordinance of William the First, separating the spiritual and temporal courts. So again, this is the laws of England. And if it happened in England, it would be the same in America or any other place in England went to, their colonies or commonwealths, whatever they call it, right? Ordinance of William I, separating the spiritual and temporal courts. No, all of you and my there faithful ones who remain in England, that in a common council and the advice of the archbishops, bishops, abbots, and all the princes of the kingdom, I have decided that the episcopal laws, which up to my, I guess it's supposed to be time, in the kingdom of the English, have not been right, or according to the precepts of the holy canons, shall be amended. Wherefore I command, and by royal authority decree, that no bishop or archdeacon shall any longer hold in the 100 Court pleas pertaining to the episcopal laws, nor shall they bring before the judgment of secular men any case which pertains to the rule of souls. But whoever shall be summoned according to the episcopal laws in any case for any fault shall come to the place which the bishop shall choose or name for this purpose, and shall there answer in his case for his fault, and shall perform his law before God and bishop, not according to the 100 Court, but according to the canons and the episcopal laws. What did that just say? It said they split the courts from temporal, spiritual. What's spiritual? Everything that has to do with faith or sin. What's a sin? A sin is breaking a commandment. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not covet thy property. Thou shalt not commit adultery, which means don't adulterate my name. Right? Those kind of things are sins. If somebody does it, it's a spiritual matter for the rule of souls. But you can't bring that into the temporal courts. And that's why the courts we walk in today could tell you, well, you can't bring God in the courtroom. Well, you could push that and say, well, sure I can. If God is in the courtroom, then you're all heretics, because I got God in me. I am a vessel for the Holy Spirit. So God is in the courtroom already. I'm here. Right? But they don't want to play that game. So we'll go on a little bit further, but understand they did split them, and this happened back in like 1070 A.D., and it hasn't changed. It's one of the very first statutes that would be on the books, because this William was the guy that came over after the conquest, or as part of the conquest. But if anyone elated with pride shall scorn or be unwilling to come before the judgment seat of the bishop, he shall be summoned once and second and third time. And if not, even then he come to make amends, he shall be excommunicated. And it be useful or needful and given effect to this, the power and justice of the king or sheriff shall be called in. So the spiritual court, if they can't get you to come to their court, can get the sheriff and the king, the power of the king, to compel you to show up. But where did the bishop set the court up? Right? If it's not the courts we're walking into and you can't bring God in those courts, well, then that's not the bishop's court. Where's the bishop's court? That's what they're not telling us. This I also forbid, and by my authority interdict, that any sheriff, provost, or minister of the king, or layman, concern himself in a matter of laws which pertain to the bishop, nor shall any layman summon another man to judgment apart from the jurisdiction of the bishop, which is why all the cases you're in now are called in rem jurisdiction, not in personam. It's a property hearing, right? And they're considering you property, or they're going to go after your property, and for that little bit of time, you're going to be the authorized representative to disperse the property and give it to them. So no layman shall summon another man to judgment apart from the jurisdiction of the bishop. So when they're calling you to court, you can say, well, you're not calling me to court because no layman can summon me to a court except to the court of the bishop. Where's the bishop? But judgment shall be passed in no place except within the episcopal see, or in such place as the bishop shall fix upon this purpose. So it should be that it would be at the cathedral. That's where the episcopal see is. That's the seat, right? Or the bishop could pick someplace else, and this is what we're trying to get him to tell us right now. Where is this other place? And of course, everybody, I can't really blame the people at the church, because they don't know this shit either, right? But we'll get into it a little bit deeper about the nitty-gritty details. Right now, this is where we're just going back to where it began. Back to the beginning. Now, there's a few other interesting things about William and what happened that time, but I guess before we go there, we should go look at this. Now, you can find this online. If you were to Google Ecclesiastic Tribunal of Malta, you would see that in the first instance, the Council of Trent, during session, must be, 24, ordered that the matrimonial and criminal cases be examined and tried by the bishop of the diocese concerned. Ordered that matrimonial and criminal cases be examined and tried by the bishop of the diocese concerned. Well, a criminal case is where somebody is breaking one of God's laws. These civil cases we go to is supposed to be a non-contested property hearing. And because you're going in there to their case, you're not contesting the property hearing. What you need to do is say, hey, the guy that's bringing me into this non-contested property hearing is committing fraud, and I need to go find the bishop's court in personam and bring him in to answer for what he's doing. And so again, the Council of Trent, this is back in the 1400s, maybe 1500s, during a particular session, ordered that matrimonial and criminal cases be examined and tried by the bishop of the diocese concerned. In 1917, Code of Canon Law regulated the judiciary department of the diocese curia. Now, the diocesan curia, that's the government of the diocese. Like the Roman curia is the government of the Catholic Church, the Holy See. The diocesan curia is the government of the diocese that you're part of, which is different than going to the cathedral, which is the spiritual side of the court. You're going to go to the executive side of the court, where the law is executed in the diocesan curia, in such a way that the bishop, the ex officio judge of first instance, would have a judicial vicar, possibly associate vicars, blah, 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 synodal judges, sole judge, as well as a representative. assessors, realtors, auditors, so forth and so on. So the judge of first instance isn't any of these people, right? He's not a judicial vicar or officials, possible associate judicial vicar. He's not a vice official. He's not a synodial judge. He's not a sole judge. He's not a collegiate tribunal. He's not an auditor. He's not a realtor. He's not an assessor. He has those at his disposal, but he isn't any of those. As well as representative. Well, what kind of representatives do the church have? They have two, called the defender of the bond, which is used in matrimonial matters, and then the promoter of justice, which that must be for criminal matters. Now, when you call the diocese and talk to the front door diocese people, they don't. No, we only deal with matrimonial stuff, right? Got to remember, there are Freemasons in the church, right? They're all over the place. Devil worshiping pagans. The devil's going crazy, but it's the end times. So let's put an end to it. Not the end times like Revelation. That already happened. This is when Christ is coming for the last time. He's already been here twice. Came back in 70 A.D. because he told the high priest, "Ye, until ye see me come back." Him, right? He was in a spiritual court talking to the spiritual judge and telling him, right, that that judge will see him return in power and glory. I don't believe that judge is still alive, so change happened around 70 A.D. The first instance is distinguished by the fact that it sets the limits of the controversy, receives the material for establishing the facts, and admits the main exceptions. Right? It's a nothing more than a probable cause hearing. It's where you take your complaint to say, "Hey, I got a complaint. Here's my evidence," and they look at it and say, "Hey, you're right." Okay, boom. That's all the judge of first instance does. Then he would send it up the line, my opinion, to be judged in these courts, to call the people in, and all these other people take over. What's his job? His job as the judge of first instance is to take your complaint and get the wheels of justice moving. It is the judge who is entrusted with the noblest function of judging in a lawsuit by applying to a specific case the law issued in the legislature. The judge who's tasked to see the justice is carried out is faced with two situations in the course of the process: that of the fact that which requires the objective truth, and that of law which claims fidelity to the norm. You need to swear to what you're complaining about, and then have a valid complaint. Like they're using color of law. You're in a foreclosure. You know that by now, if you've been listening to me, you know that the damn plaintiff is a fictitious entity, not a business at all. You can't find that name anywhere to get it to show that it ever existed. Boom, right? They're using color of law. You would, in my opinion, go to this guy with a petition saying that the attorney of record has brought this case using a fictitious entity, which is color of law, and a simulated legal process, which makes it a crime against humanity, international crime against humanity, right? And you would bring in as your evidence the summons, which isn't correct, and the complaint, which isn't correct. That's all you should have to bring in for evidence. The initiative of the parties is called the instance of the parties and the action of the judge, blah, 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 blah. Expediting of a court action means taking action necessary to avoid delay resulting in negligence of either the parties or the judge, blah, blah, blah. So who is this guy? This judge of first instance, as I pointed out in other videos, should be the dean of a deanery. He could be known as a vicar forain of a vicar forret. He could be known as a vicar forain of a deanery. If you look up the definition of dean, if you go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, which you can find on newadvent.org, or you can just Google Catholic Encyclopedia, and you put in the word dean and you read what it says, you'll see that they're saying the dean is a vicar forret. If you go to canon law, vicar forain, excuse me, not forret, vicar forain. If you go to canon law of 1983 and put in vicar forain, you'll see it says he's the dean. Well, the dean has these powers. The dean is supposed to be the judge of first instance within his territory. which is a subdivision of a diocese. Right? It's like going to the justice of the peace in English law, except they've split it apart now, and in the other side, it's a godless society. They don't bring God in the courtroom. And that's what you're dealing with, and until you decide to go to the church court, you can't get any protection, because obviously they're not going to pay attention to us in the godless society. The judge would be exceeding his jurisdiction if he acts without the petition of the plaintiff. If you don't put in a complaint, there's nothing they can do. Or if he resolves a controversy beyond what is requested by the party in the petition. Right? So you got to tell him what it is you want him to do. He exceeds his authority if he decides in favor of or against persons other than the plaintiff. Now it says judge here. I didn't say judge at first instance, right? So let me stop. So I don't know that we're talking. We may be now talking about these other judges that he has at his disposal. Sole judge, collegiate tribunal, right? So, but either way, he exceeds his authority if he decides in favor of or against persons other than the plaintiff or the respondent, if he grants or refuses anything other than that which is requested by changing the something or the cause, if in judging he adheres to facts other than those alleged and proved, blah, 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 blah. But, however, a judge does not exceed his duty, however, if he determines and declares the judicial norms applicable to the facts alleged and proved. You got to allege your facts and prove them. He can go see what the judicial norms would be for things like fraud, falsehood, whatever. And that would tell him what he's supposed to do. So we don't need to be too specific. We have to be correct. Right? But what makes it a matter of faith and sin? Well, things that go under a notary seal, because a notary is an ecclesiastic office. And a clerk is a notary. So when a clerk puts their seal on paperwork, that's a notary seal. In the strict sense, the word judge signifies a person who is legitimately constituted with ecclesiastic jurisdiction to hear and resolve contentious or criminal cases that are within the competence of the church according to the prescriptions of law. Judge signifies a person who is legitimately constituted with ecclesiastic jurisdiction to hear and resolve contentious or, wait for it, criminal cases that are within the competence of the church. So we need to bring them to him. Okay, so let's go back to William real quick. Now, William, what our good old boy William did is he brought the Jews to England. There was no record of Jews in England before the Norman Conquest in 1066. The few references to Jews and Anglo-Saxon laws of the Roman Catholic Church relate to Jewish practices about Easter. I think that's when they used to go snatch themselves a little Christian boy and bleed him out, make some unleavened bread, using his blood as the instead of water. Believing that their commercial skills and incoming capital would make England more prosperous, William invited a group of Jewish merchants from Rome, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so at first status of Jews was not strictly determined. An attempt was made to introduce the continental principle that all Jews were the king's property, and a clause to that effect was inserted under King Henry I in some manuscript of the so-called Legis Edward Confessors, the laws of Edward the Confessor. However, during Henry's reign, a royal charter was granted to Joseph, the chief rabbi of London, and all his followers. Under this charter, Jews were permitted to move about the country without paying tolls, to buy and sell goods, property, and to sell their pledges after holding them for a year, and to be tried by their peers, and to be sworn on the Torah rather than the Christian Bible. Again, these are laws of England. Special weight was attributed to Jewish oath, which was valid against that of 12 Christians. The oath of a Jew had the value of 12 Christians' oaths. Still does. Because they represent the King of England in financial matters. This sixth clause of the Charter is especially important, it granted to the Jews the right of movement throughout the kingdom as if the king's own property. Don't believe me? Go read it in the Jewish Encyclopedia. Look it up and read England. About England. There's no evidence of Jews residing in England before the Norman Conquest. Few references of Anglo-Saxon church laws relate to the Jewish practice about Easter or apply to the passing visitors, the Gallo-Jewish slave traders who imported English slaves to Roman market and thus brought about the Christianization of England. Because eventually they sent some of these Jewish slave traders, took some English children down to Constantinople where a pope was and said, hey, where do these kids come from? They look like angels. We need to send some of our people there and Christianize them. And so they did, and that was in 500 and whatever it was, and that's when the Roman Catholic Church got to England. Now, Christianity had already been in England, but now through the Byzantine Empire, when they were down in Constantinople, they sent some monks and they started the I think it was Westminster was the first cathedral. Westminster? Maybe. From the Doomsday, it's clear that his policy was to get the feudal dues paid to the royal treasury in coin rather than in kind. For this purpose, it was necessary to have a body of men scattered through the country that would supply quantities of coin. The coin, all right, the gold merchants. That's what the Jews were used for. They were already doing this on the continent. They brought it to England because the king didn't want a pig, right? He wanted your coin. So, what's the pig worth? Give me the coin instead. Who's going to handle the coins? Well, that'll be the Jews. At first, the status of the Jew was not strictly determined. The attempt was made to introduce the continental principle that he and all that was his were the king's property, and a cause to that effect was inserted under Henry I, like we heard. And again, to be tried by his peers, right, they got a charter. So this is the very first charter, and what we call the Magna Carta is really a Bill of Rights that goes with the charter they already have with the kings. To be sworn on the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible. So you think about it, go look at your Holy Bible. What's the first part? When you put your hand on it, you are putting your hands on the frickin' Jewish Bible and you're swearing to be a Jew. You're swearing on a Bible that has both Christian Judeo beliefs in it, which means you don't know who the hell you are. Because you would never swear on the frickin' Jewish Bible if you're a Christian. Because the Jews are the Antichrist. So said the Apostle John. He who does not say that Jesus Christ is God is the Antichrist. Well, the Jews don't say Jesus Christ is God now, do they? Special weight was attributed to Jews' oath, which was valid against 12 Christians. What's your chances, right? Yeah, go ahead, you Jew-loving protesters. Southern Baptist. What are you people thinking, man? It was during the reign later that the first recorded blood accusation against the Jews of the country was brought in the case of William and Norwich. That's when they used to go bleed them little kids. Put like 60 holes in them. They knew where to get all the blood, so they didn't leave any blood, right? And they would just throw the body out in the frickin' street. Throw it in their backyard. They didn't even bury it. Just throw it on the back. Like, they're done with it. Yeah, happened many times. There was no trials. I don't believe they had a trial. I think they just, the next day when they went out looking for old little William and found his bled body in the backyard of a Jew, they put 2 and 2 together and said, burn him, hang him, whatever. Strongbow's conquest of Ireland was financed by, guess what, a Jew. And chroniclers of the time noticed with some dismay the favor shown to these aliens in faith and country who amassed sufficient riches to build themselves houses of stone. They ended up being the barons. In other words, a value. Now this is 1168, right? So 100 years after the conquest, the value of the personal property of the Jews was regarded as one-fourth the whole country. Within 100 years, they had 25% of the value of the property. English Jews had little to complain about in their treatment by Henry, who was indeed accused by the contemporary chroniclers of unduly favoring those enemies of Christ. The Antichrist is the Jew. Jews freely criticize the more assailable sides of Catholicism, while the performing of miracles and worship of images. Yeah, you can't perform any miracles. I'm afraid we can't have you do that. We're going to call that superstition. And we're going to call worship of images idolatry. Meanwhile, they themselves lived in ostentatious opulence with houses resembling palaces, and helped to build a large number of abbeys and monasteries of the country. Where the Jews attempted to attack a baptized co-religionist who had taken refuge in a church. Well, what's a Jew and a baptized co-religionist? A co-religionist is somebody who has the same religion as the other guy. So he was a frickin' Jew. He's just a baptized Jew. Call them baptized pagans, because they're not a baptized Christian. They never planned on being a Christian. They just took it so they could get some of the benefits. Like then calling themselves an abbot and going and running a monastery and stealing property from people. It was just used as universal legatee of the Jewry. That was Richard, right? So basically, the Jews made themselves the property of the king, and as the property of the king, they got special rights granted to them. And blah, 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 blah. This goes on and on and on. And again, this is the Jewish encyclopedia talking about themselves. And they don't lie. This is the great thing. That's why I don't worry about this. I'm just telling what they said. This is what they're saying about themselves. They were not heretics, since the right to exist was recognized by the church. Right? They didn't say that they were Christians. They said they were Jews. They were the king's men, it is true, but no more than the barons at the time, and they had special privileges of baronial rank. Although the status of the English Jew who partook of the nature of a baron, alien, heretic, usurer, was peculiar, but on the whole, their lot was not an unfavorable one. What do they care, right? They're living for the moment. They don't believe in God, they worship the devil. I don't know, they don't believe in God, they just worship the devil. Even the devil knows there's a God. The devil for certainly knows there's a God. For the comparatively small charge of 4,000 marks, he confirmed the charter of Rabbi somebody and his sons and made it apply to all the Jews of England. Well, look at that. Oh, this is King John. Yeah. Now we're going to get to the charter. But with the loss of Normandy in 205, a new spirit seems to have overcome the attitude of John to his Jews. In the height of the triumph over the Pope, he demanded the sum of not less than 100,000 pounds from the religious houses of England and 66,000 marks from the Jews. That's 1210. Even in the Great Charter, clauses were inserted preventing the Jews or his Jewish subjects from obtaining interest during the minority of an heir. The charter is between the king and the Jews. It has nothing to do with a Christian. Enough on that. Just pointing out, right? Shit was going on back in the day, and we're still under the laws of England. And so, we got to go find this court, the bishop or the archdeacon, find out where it's being held. Because it says you can bring criminal matters there. And even today in canon law, it talks about there being a promoter of justice. Well, that would be for a criminal matter. All right, I'm not looking for money, I'm looking for justice. I'm not looking to do a property exchange, I'm looking for justice. Okay. Where are we going next? Hey, if you can, please donate. Well, let we got that and that and that and that and that. So what we're going to try to do is see what we can do, what we have that we can use for our advantage. And so we're going to go to something that Pope Paul VI put out in 1972, apostolic letter given motu proprio on the first towns or minor orders and the subdeaconate. Certain ministries were established by the church, even in the most ancient times, for the purpose of suitably giving worship to God and for the offering service to the people of God according to their needs. But these ministries, the offices to be carried out in the liturgy and the practice of charity, deemed suitable to various circumstances, were entrusted to the faithful by these ministries, right? So these weren't ministries given to the priests and the bishops. These were given to the faithful, to the laity. The conferring of these functions often took place by a special rite. Keep that in mind, special rite, in which, after God's blessing had been implored, a Christian was established in a special class or rank for fulfillment of some ecclesiastic function. Some of these functions, which are more closely connected with liturgical celebration, so they came to be considered as training and preparation for reception of sacred orders. As a result, the offices of porter, reader, exorcist, and acolyte were called minor orders in the Latin Church in relation to the subdeaconate, deaconate, priesthood, which were called the major orders. All right, so they had these four offices of porter, which is the same as a doorkeeper, and that's the one we're interested in. Doorkeeper, porter, gatekeeper, usher, ostrary, all the same thing. That's the office. So these offices were meant for the laity, for the faithful, but they eventually started to be used as training grounds, the beginning of becoming a priest. So if you wanted to become a priest, you go to become like a subdeaconate, and then a deacon, then a priest, and somewhere in there they would bestow these orders on you. Generally, though, not everywhere, these minor orders were reserved to those who received them as a step toward the priesthood. Nevertheless, since the minor orders have not always been the same, and in many functions connected with them as of present have not been exercised by the laity, it seems fitting to re-examine the practice and to adapt it to contemporary needs. What is obsolete in these offices will thus be removed, and what is useful retained, and anything new that is needed to be introduced at the time requirements for candidates for holy orders will be established. Okay, well, we're not really interested in the holy orders myself, right? Other people are, but no. I wanted what was called a minor order, and that's what we went looking for. And then a brother in Iowa got a hold of his dean in his deanery and asked him about this stuff based on one of the things I wrote, and the guy and that dean was nice enough to point him in the direction of this document we're looking at now, and this thing led to some other things, but let's get through this one first. Okay, so the council did not create anything for the Latin Church. This is Vatican II. Blah, 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 blah. But with this assertion is closely connected what is written a little earlier in the same Constitution. So what Constitution were they talking about? It's one of the Church's constitutions. Council regarding Vatican II Decree and liturgical celebrations. I have to go find it. Anyways, it's in the Catholic Constitution, right? So it's Catholic law. The Church earnestly desires that all the faithful be led to that full, conscious, and active participation in liturgical celebrations called for by the very nature of the liturgy. Such participation by the Christian people as a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, and a purchased people is their right and duty by reason of their baptism. Part of a holy nation. Where's my citizenship paper? What's the holy nation? It's the Holy See. In the reform and promotion of liturgy, this full and active participation by all the people is the aim to be considered before all else. So we all are supposed to be participating. Among the particular offices to be preserved and adapted to contemporary needs are those that are in a special way more closely connected with the ministries of the Word and the altar, and that in the Latin Church they are called the offices of reader and acolyte and the subdeaconate. So these were the ones that were going to adapt to use for those going for holy orders. In addition to these, to the offices universal in the Latin Church, right? So those are the universal ones. The conferences of bishops may request others of the Apostolic See if they judge the establishment of such offices in their region to be necessary or useful because of special reasons. And it was Pope Francis himself that said the office of the Ostery existed in ancient times and still exists. To these belong the ministries of porter, office of Ostery, porter, doorkeeper, usher, exorcist, catechist. In accordance with the reality itself and with the contemporary outlook, above mentioned ministries should no longer be called minor orders, and their conferral is not called ordination, but institution. This is the key. There are people right now, there's a thing called the ministry of hospitality, and there are people who act as ushers, but they didn't get the canonical institution. They're more like a volunteer, like a door greeter. They could have this, but they didn't get it. The best they may have gotten, as we'll see, is they may have gotten a thing like a commission from the parish priest to be an usher. But an institution is done by the bishop, and it's got certain formalities and paperwork, and you're going to get an office within the church, within the Catholic Church. And when you say you have an office within the Catholic Church, that's the government. You're a government minister. You're not a spiritual minister. Oh, and what can be entrusted to the laity? So how'd this work? Well, first of all, there'd be no townsler. That's when they cut your hair. Did a funny thing. What up to now were called minor orders are henceforth to be called ministries, and ministries may be assigned to lay Christians, hence they are no longer to be considered as reserved to candidates for a sacrament of holy orders. It's a ministry, right? In a ministry, you should go through a ceremony to get your ministry. And this is what's happening. Nobody's getting the ceremony. They're just kind of volunteering. The following requirements for admission to ministries: the presentation of a petition that has been freely made out and signed by the aspirant to the ordinary who has the right to accept the petition. Suitable age, all the stuff we already went through, right? So, what does institution mean? Well, in ecclesiastic law, it means the act by which the ordinary commits the cure of souls to a person presented to a benefice. That's the ecclesiastic side. In civil law, institution of heir, the act by which the testator nominates one or more persons to succeed him in all rights, active and passive. Well, that's the same as a benefice. A benefice is the same thing. It's your ecclesiastic privileges. Ecclesiastic privileges, we'll call them. So, let's go on further. All right, so this was 1972. Hey, if you can, donate. Where are we at now? Let's look at how they do one of these today. This is written by a Jesuit. Ministry of Acolyte, right? They're all ministries now. They're no longer minor orders. They're all ministries. Ministry of Acolyte is one of the two that was going to be kept for the entire church, universal church. I think it's a reader. We'll find out here. So anyways, before Vatican II, there were 4 minor orders: lector, exorcist, acolyte, porter. There was also subdeaconate. They were required before one could receive the sacrament of orders as a deacon or priest. Vatican II called for the reversion of the sacraments and liturgy. The reversion came about because almost no one performed the ministries of porter, exorcist, and indeed even lector. Well, if nobody was performing the ministry of porter, they're the doorkeeper, right? You're supposed to be the keeper of the door, and you're supposed to keep the riffraff out of the kingdom of heaven. No one's performing the duties. That's the same problem that Adam had. He couldn't keep the garden, couldn't keep the snake out. And then he stood there and watched the snake talk Eve into taking a bite from an apple and didn't say anything about it. Pope Paul VI issued the defining document in, it's supposed to be 1972, the motu proprio. Eliminate minor orders completely. Eliminate the townsure, subdeaconate. He established 2 offices of reader and acolyte, which included the functions of the subdeaconate. It is especially fitting that the ministries of reader and acolyte should be entrusted to those, as candidates of sacred orders, desire to devote themselves to God and church in a special way. Right there, but they're candidates. They're not in sacred orders yet. They're still laity. They're just candidates. Both by studying gradual exercise, ministry, the word, the altar, candidates of sacred orders should, through intimate contact, understand and reflect upon double aspect of priestly life. Candidates for the permanent deaconate and for deaconate leading to presbyteriate, as well as candidates of the presbyteriate itself, are to receive ministries of readers and acolyte, unless they have already done so. If they don't have them, they're supposed to get them. Again, this is back in 1972 he was writing this stuff. Right, so this is what the change was. If you ain't got them and you're already a priest, you're going to get them. These 2 ministries. If you're going to become a priest, you're going to get them. But you're going to get them before you become a priest. According to Pope Paul VI, these are not so much a share in the priesthood of ordained priests, but ministries for the laity. Okay? Who by baptism share in the priesthood of Jesus Christ. They are seen as good preparation for priesthood, but not so much as a stage in the process towards ordination. They got nothing to do with becoming a priest. These ministries are for the laity, and there's called one today, as we're going to see, is called the ministry of hospitality, and within that is the ushers. They do have canonical status and have special right of installation. All ministries have canonical status. That's why they're a ministry. And so, as the Pope said, you're not going to be ordained into it because it isn't in that particular ministry. You're going to have a right of installation. You're going to be installed into an office. In some ways, Paul VI was dismantling a clerical system that had existed for centuries by emphasizing the non-clerical lay ministries. But the surprise or irony is that these 2 ministries are very rarely given to laity and almost exclusively are given to seminarians on the path to ordination. While there are many laymen and women serving as readers and ministers of communion, they are usually commissioned in a parish by a parish priest. They are not officially installed by the ordinary. This goes for all ministries. He's basing this on the ones he's talking about, but this would go for all 4 of these prior minor orders which have been made into ministries. They are not officially installed by the ordinary. If you're not officially installed, you're not going to get the ecclesiastic benefits. You're just going to be a frickin' volunteer. How does one become an acolyte? It is conferred by institution rather than ordination. One does not become a cleric by being instituted as a reader. One does not become a cleric by being instituted as a usher. Ministries may be committed to lay Christians, hence they are no longer to be considered as reserved to candidates for the sacrament of orders. As a matter of fact, very few strictly lay persons are readers or acolytes in the sense of instituted. Many serve in those capacities, altar servers, lay readers, through simple commissioning by the parish priest, or even without that commissioning. The rite of institution would not be a sacrament as in orders, but a sacramental, sacrament-like basically. Ministries are conferred by the ordinary, the bishop, and in clerical institutes, the major superior. Now we're going to find out that bishop means a lot of different things, but at the end of the day, you got to go through this rite of institution. And as we looked at before, the rite of institution for becoming an ostery porter was basically that the bishop took the keys off the altar and either handed them to you or did something with the keys to the church to you or something. It was It's a real simple process. It can be done any day of the week. Some of these things can only be done on special days of the week, like during a homily, like in Mass, but the one for a porter had nothing to do with that. So, okay, so that's the ministry of the acolyte. What else we got here? Let's look at institution. What does that mean? Canonical institution. In the strictest sense, the word denotes a collation of an ecclesiastic benefice by a legitimate authority on the presentation of a candidate by a third person. So here's an interesting thing that just happened. We didn't know all these fancy words at the time. We were going for the office of the ostery. And I had done a petition and shared it on a video. And Jeff out in Washington, Rose put one in, Bob in Arizona's put one in, I put one in, Jeff's put one in. I don't know if anybody else has or not. What Jeff did is he took his down to his local parish. And he sat down with the parish priest and he showed it to him and said, look, this is what it says, blah, 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 blah. And he signed it, and his parish priest signed it, and his parish priest said that he would send it on to the dean of the deanery, and this dean of the deanery, in the definition of dean, says a dean is one that could confer minor orders. Of course, they're not called minor orders anymore. Now they're these ministries, but I think he can do the same thing. So, Roe had taken hers right to the deanery. That's what Bobby had done, taking his right to the deanery. I had mailed mine to the deanery. Roe's dean is part-time because he's retiring, new guy's coming in. He hasn't shown up yet, but she had mailed a copy to him also, so he's probably seen it. That's probably why he's not showing up. Bobby's guy saw his, called him and talked to him about it. They were going to set up a meeting for early this week, and now it's been postponed, and we're going a little bit different direction right now with see what else we can get out of the contacts Bob's made. To try to find this judge of first instance, to get somebody, here's the point, we're trying to get somebody to admit also that the dean is the judge of first instance. Who is it we're supposed to be taking these petitions to? If you don't want to go grab this office, that's fine. I mean, if you're scared about the church, I don't know what to tell you, but okay. You still take advantage of the church because that's the only place you can bring in a crime against a crime against faith. And since unum sanctum in the 1302 or whatever it was, right, the Pope claimed jurisdiction over all human beings. So let's use that to our advantage. The term is used also for the actual putting in possession of a benefice and for the approbation requisite for exercising of ecclesiastic ministry when an authority inferior to the bishop has power to confer ecclesiastic benefices. And so, we need to find out who this is, but we're trying to get our benefice. Because the benefice is the ecclesiastic privileges, and part of those is then they can't harm you anymore, them out there. You're going to have the same status as a cardinal within the church. You're going to join the harvest. Right? You're going to join the harvest as a doorkeeper. And everybody that joins the harvest gets paid the same. So whatever deal a cardinal has, the same deal you're going to get. This occurs in the case of benefices subject to the right of patronage, and one of the principal prerogatives, the right of presenting to the bishop a titular for vacant benefice. It also occurs when virtue of privilege of a concordant, a chapter, a sovereign, a government has the right to present to the Pope, blah, 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 right? People for benefices. The right to institute for major benefices rests with the Pope, but in the case of minor benefices, it belongs to the bishop and his vicar general, to a vicar capitular, or even other ecclesiastic in virtue of the foundation of title dating from before the Council of Trent. So a lot of people that can institute you, but you need to go through the rite of institution. In the case of minor benefices, it requires an actual installation by a competent authority. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the installation. The right of installation formerly belonged to archdeacons, but now reserved to the bishop, his vicar general, or his delegate, ordinarily the dean. All right, ordinarily it's the dean that can give you this office. So maybe you need to go to the parish priest first, say I want to sign up for the ministry of the whatever it's called, hospitality, and we just need to tell them, and we want to have a canonical institution, like it said in Pope Paul VI, motu proprio, right? That's your law, parish priest. So get the dean over here to do his thing. And the dean, see, and the dean has a separate seal. This is one of the things that we haven't seen it yet, but we believe to be, because Rose Dean is no longer the parish priest. Normally, you have all these parish pastors. I should use the right term. They're called pastors. And out of the group of 10 or 15 that make up the parishes within a deanery, vicarate, another name for it, by a vote between the priest within that jurisdiction, one of them is chose to be the dean. And they hold the office for 3 years. It's not like a forever thing. It's a 3-year deal. And they can be voted in again and, blah, 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 blah. But every 3 years. Well, Rose Dean, if you saw the last video, he's the guy in red who was blessing these at the Red Mass. He's retiring. So they have a new pastor for the parish. But he's still the dean. So said her parish priest when she was asking about the dean. Said, no, the dean's still the dean. They got somebody else to take over the parish, but the dean's still the dean. And then Roe went to where the deanery is and heard the same thing from the secretary. And they were talking about, Roe said, well, look, I'd like to leave my my petition. I'd like to get it sealed and get a copy of it. And the lady said, well, the dean takes the seal with him. Well, that can't be the parish seal, or the parish wouldn't be able to do any business. So the dean has a different seal. A long way to get around it. The fact that the dean seems to have a different seal, and that's why we need him to do the installation and put his seal on the paperwork. The parish isn't good enough, right? He's in the administrative, the dean is an administrative office of the Catholic Church. Has nothing to do with the Roman Catholic Church parish. The Catholic Church is the government of the Universal Church, and he's an executor in the executive of the Catholic Church. We need him to execute the law and put that damn seal on some paper. Okay, so anyways, it goes on and on and on and on and on. But a probation it talked about. I don't really want to talk about this much, except for one thing it had in here that was very interesting. By bishop is meant also his vicar general, or the vicar capitular, or administrator during vacancy of a see. So this vicar capitular is, if the bishop dies, they have to vote somebody in to sit there until a new bishop has been ordained, or whatever the proper word is for that, by the Pope. Also, any regular prelate having ordinary jurisdiction over a certain territory. And that's what a dean has. He has ordinary jurisdiction. He's the government. He's governing power over a territory. That's what's meant by a bishop. It doesn't mean just the guy that, we got guys that are bishops of a diocese. Yeah, he's a bishop. But so is his vicar general. So is the administrator if there isn't a bishop. And so is a regular prelate, like a monsignor, like a reverend, like a pastor, if he has ordinary jurisdiction over a certain territory, and there's only one of them in this certain territory, and that's called the dean, or the vicar forain, or the archpriest, or the archdeacon, or whatever the hell it's called. It seems like mainly they're called vicar forains, or dean. In the Catholic Church. As far as other churches, I'm not going to speak of. I don't know. But I'm not saying that it doesn't exist through there either. You're just going to have to go figure it out. If they claim to be part of the universal Catholic Church, right? If you follow the Apostles' Creed, well, then your church is part of the universal Catholic Church. Yeah, we already did that. Canonical institution. Okay. Hey, if you can, please donate. PayPal, AshleyRatluski@gmail.com or 10955 14 Mile Road, Rockford, Michigan, 49341. Oh, what's this one? Okay, this is about an usher. In many denominations of the Christian church, a church usher is the first official representative when entering the church. Right? It's an official office. You're representing the Catholic Church, Universal Church. The role of the usher in a church is a volunteer position. So they can't make you be one, you have to go ask for it. It is often considered one of honor, particularly in the church community. Yeah, selects an usher by nomination. The concept of an usher is not new. The Old Testament, there were positions addressed as doorkeepers or gatekeepers, and their roles were very similar. Jesus' disciples can be considered ushers in a sense that they prepared the way for Jesus, kept order among those listening to Christ, served food to the audience, cleaned up after service. That's an usher. Sounds like an apostle to me. In modern times, a church usher has many duties depending on church denomination, size, blah, 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 blah. Christian living. Ushers, as the ones who stand at the door, greet and distribute pamphlets, can be considered an ambassador for the church. It's why you get ODC passport and a key part of the body of Christ. The role is supposed to continue long after the church has adjourned. The life of an usher should be an example of Christian living, everyday life, by saying, hey, heretic, you can't do that. You can't take the dude's property. By using color of law or simulated legal process. We have a bad day and we figure out where that court is. Now, let's read some good stuff about an usher. Good stuff. Did I do all these other ones? Pretty much. Oh, Royal Wars. Before the conquest, there was no real evidence of Jews settling in England before 1870s. The Domesday Book recorded Manasseh settled in rural Oxfordshire. However, it is believed that it was only an incident of a Gentile with an unusual, for a Gentile, Old Testament name. We do know the Jews from Rome arrived at the invitation, if not the command of William the Conqueror, to introduce and establish a network of credit and trading links between his new English lands and French ones. The English and Norman French Jews communities would remain connected by family ties, literature, rabbinical exchanges throughout the period. Yeah, what is a rabbinical? Hey, where are the Levitic priests, right? If these people are still the chosen people of God, where's the Levitic priest? Numbers chapter 18. That was supposed to last forever. I don't hear any of them claiming to be a Levitic priest. Do you? I don't think so. I believe that they're de facto Jews. Jews by religion, not by descent. In fact, to get Israeli passport, right, you just need to say that you are Jewish by religion, and you can have citizenship within Israel. Well, then would it be any more difficult to say, well, I'm Christian by religion, I'm going to take citizenship within the Holy See? The Ministry of Hospitality, welcomers, ushers. The ministry of usher, perhaps called by other names over times, has been part of the Jewish Christian tradition for millennia. Keepers of the threshold, man the entrance in the area of the worship and collected money offerings for the people. Guardians of the threshold, gatekeepers of the camp, undertook service to welcome and security. Some were rostered to stand guard over the tent of the Lord. Others guarded the religious treasures, sacred utensils, furniture, choice, purchase, substance, used, worship. It sounds like that's part of the Levitic priesthood. In early Christian era, doorkeepers and porters served the church in Rome and Syria. In medieval church, the role of porter was one of 4 minor orders, which Thomas Aquinas described as carrying out some of the original roles of deacons in the church. The minor order of porter was conferred on all those seeking ordination in the priesthood until Pope Paul VI suppressed all minor orders, and he made them ministries. They're no longer called orders. Don't say it's an order. Call it what it is. It's a ministry. Even though seminarians were ordained as porters, the actual ministry was usually carried out in the parish by laymen who served as ushers. Right? So the seminarians got the office, but there were laymen who performed the duties within the church. But they weren't out there with the power of the office to do whatever else needed to be done. For generations, ushers have assisted the parish worship by welcoming people, helping them find seats in the church, taking up collection, passing out bulletins, blah, 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 blah. Hospitality has long been part of the Christian tradition and caring for the sick and feeble, providing almshouses and orphanages and destitute refuge for pilgrims. You gotta get to do that. With the power of a cardinal, you're going to get to do that. Hospitality is at basis the usher's ministry. The usher is often the first person who worshipers meet when they arrive at the church. The usher is then the opportunity and responsibility to represent the rest of the assembly in offering hospitality. Scriptural references. Hospitality was the heart of the Jewish scriptures and was highly valued by Jesus. He tells stories of feasts and banquets, was very relaxed in the company of public sinners, experienced the hospitality of many, including Martha and Mary, celebrated Passover with his friends, rescued a newly married couple from poor hospitality, let some water be brought that you may bathe your feet and then rest yourselves under the tree. Let us arrange a little room on the roof and furnish it for him with a bed, table, chair, lamp, so that when he comes to us, he can stay there. You can set the table for me. You anoint my head with oil. You set the table for me, excuse me. This thing is put together kind of ass backwards. Anyone who welcomes you welcomes me, and those who welcome me welcome the one who sent me. What's an usher do? He welcomes. For I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. What's an usher do? He welcomes. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. What's an usher do? He's serving. In the parable of the great feast, Jesus invites the poor, crippled, blind, lame to share in the banquet. Quick, bring the fine robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet. Take the fatted calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. Love one another with mutual affection. Anticipate one another in showing respect. Do not neglect to show hospitality, for by the means some have entertained angels without knowing it. Be the good usher. Hospitality plays a vital role in creating a sense of community for the worship. A person who feels welcome and valued more likely to enter wholeheartedly in a celebration liturgy. Okay, so anyways, looks like there's something to do with being an usher. Ministry of ushering. Any act of Christian service that helps direct people into fellowship with Jesus Christ is a ministry. The most prominent ministry in the church is preaching. Paul wrote to the Romans, how can they believe in one whom they have not heard? How can they hear without someone preaching to them? Notice I said hear, not read. A second prominent ministry of the church is teaching. Next to preaching of the gospel, Martin Luther believed that teaching was the highest calling of mankind. Teaching, speaking of Martin Luther, before I forget, where is that? Is that in here? We gotta go back and find it here. Martin Luther, the Jews and their lies. Yes, this is the Martin Luther of the same one who wrote his own Bible. Yeah, put in there by faith alone. It doesn't say that in the Bible anywhere. In fact, if you go read um, Book of James, I believe it is, it says in there that you're justified by works. No wonder Martin didn't like that. Anyways, even Martin Luther, he had his problem. He wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies. And, having read this, it says, yeah, it's in the original language, whatever, because this has been translated English, but it's in the Library of Congress. So, I want to get on to where was it talking about? The fourth great ministry of the church is ushering. Paul, who believed in the power of preaching, the importance of teaching, the ministry of music, also wrote, everything should be done in a fitting and orderly way. Ushers are given the responsibility of attending to the details of each service so that it is conducted in an orderly fashion. The importance of ushers' ministry caused one pastor to say, if I had to choose between losing the ushers or the choir, I would rather lose the choir. This undoubtedly has an exaggeration intended to emphasize the importance of ushering ministry in his church. But it is a fact that it will take music from an extraordinary choir to overcome the poor work of an inefficient usher. Though of unequal importance, preaching, teaching, singing, and ushering are so closely related to one another that one does not tend to rise above the other in a given church. Ushering's in the Old Testament. Later in the temple was called the doorkeepers. The psalmist, writing for the director of music in the temple, understood the importance of usher when he said, how lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord Almighty! Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than dwell in the tents of the wicked. One of the functions of the doorkeeper in the Old Testament was to receive the collections from the people. The Old Testament chronicler spoke of Shallum and his fellow gatekeepers who were responsible for guarding the entrance of the dwelling of the Lord. Preacher in Ecclesiastics wrote, the day when the keepers of the house tremble. In Ezekiel's vision, future temple, he saw a space reserved for the priests, the musicians, and 2 sets of ushers, the priests who have charge of the temple and the priests who have charge of the altar. New Testament in the temple, ushers were given unusual authority, evidently as uniformed guards. In the books of Acts, the captains of the temple and the officers are referred to several times in connection with arrest and general handling of the crowds, and that's what we're supposed to be doing. Arresting them frickin' devil-worshipping pagans. Taking them to the church court. To the court under the Pope, who says he has jurisdiction over all human beings. And say, you guys can't do that. It was these doorkeepers or ushers who carried out high priest orders in persecutions against the apostles immediately following Pentecost, and 30 years later in the arrest of maltreatment of Paul. Jesus used his disciples as ushers on many occasions. They prepared the way for his coming. They introduced people to him, and they directed people who had come to hear him speak or to be touched by his healing hands. On one occasion, Jesus gave a sharp warning to the disciples, who as ushers had endeavored to keep the children away from him. On still another occasion, Jesus directed the disciples in organizing a congregation of 5,000 men plus women and children to be seated in groups of 50. And then with Jesus supplying the unending loaves of fish, the disciples served the hungry multitude. The first church board also served as ushers. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the Word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers, choose 7 men among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them and give our attention to prayer and ministry of the Word. This proposal pleased the whole group. The character of this first deacons is spelled out clearly. Right? So that's what we're supposed to be doing. You got this group of people that are ministering the Word, the bishops, the priests, the pastors, and then you got this other division of the church that runs the government of the church, the day-to-day handling of a, of a nation. A nation has to have a government. And so it needs somebody out there to make sure that the church's laws are being followed. If not, the devil gets in the details. So, okay, that's enough of that. Let's see. Oop. So what I found. Oh, it's wrong one. So I found this online for my my diocese, and I don't know if this is the right one or not, but I've sent them something I'll show you here in a minute, because I had done this prior to reading all the things about these ushers I've just been reading to you. Diocese of Grand Rapids, Office of Pastoral Services, where it says one of the things they do, certification of ministries. Sounds like something we need to get done, right? I don't want a commission. I want an institution, canonical institution, and part of that may be getting a certification. Formation and training for parish ministers. It didn't say parish priest, it's parish ministers. So I sent them this right here, where I just kind of go through what it was. I, as Robert Allen Lusky, the earthen vessel, host, and consecrated church of the Holy Spirit, by his authority enlist your help in conforming the temporal order to the will of the Lord. In accordance with Ministeria Quadam, the office of porter is no longer considered as a minor order, but was preserved as a ministry of porter, conferred not by ordination, but by canonical institution. By motu proprio, a number of provisions for institution into various ministries were incorporated via Ministeria Quadam, including, the following requirements are presentation of a petition by the aspirant to the ordinary who has the right to accept the petition. So we got to find the guy that has the right to accept the petition. Doesn't do any good to give a petition to the wrong guy. Who has the right? And I believe it's the dean has the right. He's the ordinary. Ordinary is the same as a bishop. Well, a bishop has ordinary power. Suitable age, blah, blah, blah. As His Holiness Pope Francis stated recently in the homily, who are we to close the doors? In the early church, even today, there is the ministry of the Ushering. Usher. So I have submitted a petition to the Dean of the East Deanery, which appears to be the district I am incorporated into, but have not received a reply. It could be the Dean is no longer the competent ordinary, as the office is no longer a minor order. I would appreciate hearing it from him, as I have other questions for him, such as who is the judge of first instance within the East Deanery. In the meantime, I'm contacting you based on the online brochure, which we just looked at. It talks about the certification of ministries. Once again, quoting from Ministeria Quadam. In addition to the offices universal to the Latin Church, the Conference of Bishops may request other apostolic see. I already talked about that. A search of the internet shows there is a Ministry of Hospitality. So if you go online and you put in Ministry of Hospitality, you'll find all sorts of hits that go through this kind of stuff we're talking about right now. It states that the usher is the oldest lay ministry in the Catholic Universal Church. However, I believe anyone now acting as an usher is doing so as a volunteer under parish commission, not by canonical institution. I must insist on canonical institution and not a commission from the parish. Please provide me an index of all ministries you certify, as well as any that may not be certified but were requested of the Apostolic See in accordance with the provisions of blah, 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 blah. I desire to accept the ministry of porter, hospitality, usher, or similar, and await its prompt conferral by canonical institution upon me. I've attached a copy of my baptismal certificate to properly identify myself for said canonical institution, right? Canonical institution, canonical institution, canonical institution, by institution. If you have a petition form to use, please provide it, as well as the name and address of the competent ordinary for this matter. If what I have sent to the dean of the East Deanery is acceptable, please contact him for my already signed and delivered petition. I attach a copy of what was sent to him. I ask if you have any questions or guidance to offer, that you do not hesitate to call me, and if you're not sure of anything, that you confer with the diocesan bishop and moderator of the diocesan curia. I can be reached most days at, however, I may lose my phone because I can't pay my rent. I can't pay phone bill. I can't pay electric. Could really use some help, guys. What is an usher? Anyways, typical description of modern usher. The ministry of usher is the oldest lay ministry in the Catholic Church. The usher of today were descended of a long line of people of God who have gone before them. We see their antecedents in 1 Chronicles, where they are called the gatekeepers. During the time of Christ, temple guard numbered in the hundreds and were forerunners of today's ushers. The more immediate predecessor of today's ushers can be found in the clerical order of the porter, instituted in the 3rd century. During those times, it was the duty of the porter or ushers to guard the door of the church against any intruders who might disturb the service. The porter's duties were so important that they came to be included in the rite of ordination. And now we want the rite of institution, where they were specified as to ring the bells, open the church sacristy, and open the book for the preacher. In 1972, Pope Paul VI abolished the order of porter, and this important task was given to the laity, right? It is no longer an order. It went back to being a ministry. So, again, one last time, if you can, please do donate. PayPal is ashleyritluski@gmail.com, and snail mail is robertritluski, 10955 14 Mile Road, Rockford, Michigan. And I think I've gone through all the things I had, other than making some phone calls now to see if we can push this rope a little bit further. But what are we looking for? Right, you want to find where it is that the matrimonial and criminal cases are being examined within your diocese. And that should be determined, regulated the judiciary department of the diocesan curia. So the diocesan curia knows where these things are. The diocesan curia has a moderator. The moderator, by being the moderator, is also a vicar general. By being a vicar general, he's also considered a bishop. So, the judge of first instance isn't all these things here. He's going to have judicial vicars at his disposal. He's going to have vice officials, synodial judges, sole judge, collegiate tribunals, auditors, realtors, assessors, as well as representatives. All those are available to him, but that isn't him. The judge of first instance is the guy is the proper person to bring your frickin' petition to point out the fact that this man, whoever it is using color of law and a simulated legal process to steal your property. And bring in a copy of whatever it is, show it to them, and that's your evidence, and let's see if we can get that far, see if they can do anything with it. But you're never, ever, 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 ever going to get anything out of the courts of today that we go into, these secular courts, because it's a godless society. Right? And for whatever reason, they're in this. I mean, they could be more fair, but they're not being. Right? It's the court of the Jew, man. It's Talmudic law, where it's perfectly fine to steal a Gentile's property. And who's a Gentile to a Jew? Anybody who's not a Jew. So, I guess that's about all I have to say on that subject. Good luck with it. I think as far as the Ministry of Hospitality or usher, especially if you're a Catholic right now and a practicing Catholic, if you were to go to your parish priest, he could tell you who to go talk to. And those people right there should all immediately ask for the ordination. And you should be able to show it to them. And you should be able to, it's as simple as this. Let's go back and look at these real quick, just so you can see what the names of them were. Right? Just write this down, Ministeria Quadam. You put it online, it's easy enough to find, right? This is the thing we looked at. I'm going to send this out, but if you don't get a copy of it, this is the thing that says what they did, and that all these minor orders are now ministries, and that in fact it takes you're part of a holy nation, and their conferral will not be called ordination but institution. And you want the institution. The institution's done by a bishop. And make them go get you an answer. And the only answer is, you're right, canonical institution, let's go. Right? You do not want to get a commission from the priest. That isn't good enough. Canonical institution, and that canonical institution is going to put you into a benefice, give you an office in the Catholic Church, make you a citizen of the Holy See, give you the same rights, title, and interest as ambassadors of the Holy See, same as a cardinal. Everybody gets paid the same in the vineyard. Right? So we got to quit milling around outside and go in the vineyard and start working. And I'm putting this out because there are Freemasons in the church, Satan's in the church, all these things that you bitch about are there. It ain't everybody, but they're there, and we got to find an angel. Once one person cracks the nut, it's over. But we got to crack the nut. And 3 or 4 of us trying this stuff ain't enough. Right? So get off your ass, get off the bench, and go talk to somebody. Please. Well, Francis is counting on it. Okay. Y'all have a great day. See ya.